start. I'm from the Wisconsin Board for People with Developmental Disabilities and co-lead of the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. On behalf of the coalition, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today to celebrate this anniversary. And we'd also like to welcome our distinguished guests from the state legislature. The Disability Vote Coalition includes disability organizations, people with disabilities, and allies from across Wisconsin who all have a shared commitment to ensuring that more people with disabilities are registered to vote, cast a ballot, and understand and assert their voting rights. Before we begin, I'm going to get into a few logistics for today's program. We ask that you please remain muted throughout the session. We're hoping to have time after each speaker for a few questions. So if you're like me and might forget, feel free to use the chat feature to type your questions, and we will answer as many as we can. If that chat's not accessible, you can raise your hand, but please wait to be called on. We do have ASL interpreters, and if you want the ability to multi-pin, so you can see the interpreter better, please message Barbara Beckert in the chat and she can give you that capability. For the speakers, if you could please say your name before you speak, that will help with accessibility. We do have an auto captioning feature, hopefully you're familiar with, but to turn that on, or you can turn it on or off, you just need to click the caret symbol that's next to the CC Live Transcript button, and that will allow you to either hide the subtitles or view the full transcript. At the top of your video screen, you can choose between a speaker view where you'll just see the speaker talking, or a gallery view where you'll see everybody, so it's your preference. And then finally, I want to mention we have a load of resource materials available on our website for anything to do with voting and specific to people with disabilities. So we strongly encourage you to check out the website. It's disabilityvote.org, and there is a specific link to this event where you can get information and can later access this recording. As we note the availability of these accommodations I went through, we want to highlight that we are holding an accessible event, and we can thank the ADA for that. The Americans with Disabilities Act is one of America's most comprehensive pieces of civil rights legislation. The ADA prohibits disability discrimination by state and local governments. It provides standards for access to places for public accommodation. It protects people with disabilities from discrimination in the workplace. It ensures equal access to healthcare, social services, transportation, and telecommunications. Title II of the ADA requires state and local governments to ensure that people with disabilities have a full and equal opportunity to vote. This anniversary provides an opportunity for us to reflect on our accomplishments in advancing disability rights and look towards the future where the goals of the ADA are fully realized and people with disabilities have that full and equal opportunity to participate in their communities, including access to voting. Today, we'll hear from national and state legal experts about the protections in federal law for voters with disabilities. We'll also hear from a distinguished panel of self-advocates about their perspective on the ADA and about why ballot return assistance is important to their voting rights. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Barbara Beckert.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm Barbara Beckert with Disability Rights Wisconsin and a co-lead in the Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. We're so glad that all of you are here with us today to discuss a very important topic regarding the ADA anniversary and access to voting rights at Wisconsin at a very challenging time. So thank you for being here. I am going to introduce our keynote speaker in just a minute. I did want to note that because of the U.S. Department of Justice policy to not allow recording, we request that you not record our next speaker. So I am going to pause the
Thank you.
Yeah, you are most welcome. And if there are additional questions people have, please feel free to send those, to email those to me directly. And Charlotte has graciously indicated that she's willing to continue the conversation if there are additional questions. So we're going to move now to our next speaker, Kit Kerschensteiner, who is the Director of Legal and Advocacy Services at Disability Rights Wisconsin and a champion of disability rights. It's an honor to work with her. Kit will address the aftermath of the Tigan case, what it means for voters with disabilities who need absentee voting protections, and how to request an accommodation. So I will turn it over now to Kit, and just a reminder of everyone to please stay muted so that we can hear our speaker. Thank you. Take it away, Kit.
Thanks, Barbara. I'd just first like to personally thank Charlotte for being here today and giving DOJ's perspective on voting and where we've come from. I think it's important in celebrating the ADA to remember it wasn't that long ago when people with disabilities were turned away from the polls based on misinformation or prejudices of a poll worker as to what they thought people were competent to do or not do, and how important Title II of the ADA has been to create full and equal access for people with disabilities in all aspects of voting. And I think that the rights that she laid out, specifically physical accessibility to the polling place, the ability to vote independently and privately, that's same as everybody else, to be able to have a reasonable modification to the policies, practices, and procedures, have a service animal, and receive assistance from a person of their choice or a poll worker to help them vote, and making sure that the sites that are selected are in fact equally accessible to people with disabilities. Now, bringing it down a little bit closer to home in Wisconsin, I think probably you've all heard in one way or the other about the Tigan case that was recently decided by the state Supreme Court, and have maybe some questions about what it did. What did the Tigan court do? I think it's first important to start out with what the Tigan court did not do. And if you plan on voting in person, either early or on the day of the election, the Tigan decision didn't change anything about that for you. If you plan on using an absentee ballot, it didn't change the way you fill that ballot out and the requirements to get it or what you need to put on the outside. All those things are still the same. So once you seal that ballot, the question then is, what do I do next? And that's where Tigan came in to play. So you got that ballot and you're looking at it and think, what do I do? You got two choices. One is you can put it in a mailbox, US mail. The other is you can deliver it to your clerk. Now, if you want to put it in your mailbox, first of all, I'd have to say big, warning, 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 mail is really slow. Don't put it in the mailbox 2 days before the election because it has to be there by the time the polls close. So think really hard about, do I have enough time to put this in the mail? If you think you do, there is nothing that the Tigan court said that changes your ability to have someone help you put that in the mail. Drive it to the post office, stick it in the slot, whatever that is, okay? Nothing changed about that. I know that there's some question, but I heard somebody say, or I heard the clerk say that that's illegal. There's nothing, they've been reading the decision wrong. There's nothing in there at all. There's just nothing. So given that we have all these nice federal voting rights that are still there, and Tigan court didn't talk about that either, DRW feels pretty confident that you can just go ahead and stick your ballot in the mail, same as you did last time. Now, if it's too late for you to think you can safely mail it, then your only other choice is to deliver it to the clerk. That's the biggest change. Used to be there were drop boxes around most of your communities that you could just zoom by and you could stick it in. Those are gone. You won't find them where they were last time. Now, a lot of you, like I know where I live, the village hall has a box out front. I put my payment for my dog license fee in there. I can pay my water utility bill there. Do not put your ballot in there. Okay, even though it's there, right outside, they have to be staffed, which means there have to be people there with their eyes on it. So you're not going to be able to use those. So then the question is, how do I deliver it to my clerk? If you are able to do it yourself, that's always the best choice. But a lot of people have problems due to their disability with how they're going to get that to their clerk. And if you're one of those folks, we have on our website put out a process and a sample form letter that we think would be helpful to you. What we're suggesting is that number one, you call your clerk and request a disability related modification to the rule that you can't have anybody else help you deliver your ballot. You can just take that form that's on our website and you can just read it to them. You don't have to come up with any fancy way of saying it. Just go ahead and read that. Then make sure you ask the clerk for the address of where the ballot should be returned to, because it may make a difference. If it's the day of the election, you may have to go to the polling place to get it delivered. You may be able to go to the clerk's office on another day. So make sure you know where you're going with that ballot, or someone who's assisting you is going. Then you should, that same form that you read to the clerk, you should go ahead and fill it out. It's only a couple things. You have to put in name and the name of who's delivering it. And, you know, it's very easy. It's not a complicated form at all. So make sure you include your name, the person who's delivering it. It's got a blank right in there. And then have the person that's going to deliver that ballot for you take that form with them, so that they have your ballot and they have that form and they turn them both in. It'd be really helpful if you could make a copy of it before you send your person as helping you off. Do it with your phone. Doesn't have to be a fancy, I don't have a copier on my printer, or I don't have a printer or whatever. So just take a picture of it with your phone to keep so that you can show that you did it. Now I know a lot of people are concerned, well, how do I know what happened? You can track the status of your ballot online, and I think all those links will be on the My Wisconsin Vote. When that link will be up on our website, Disability Vote Coalition website, for you to figure out where all these things can go. If you're having a problem, don't forget you can call the voter hotline and we can maybe help you straighten it out. Or you can file a complaint with the Department of Justice, which isn't going to help you much that day, but it's someplace you can register that something didn't happen the way you think it should happen. So that's kind of basically what Tiken did. It mostly affected how you're going to deliver a ballot to your clerk if it's absentee. So don't let it back into being afraid to do something the way you did it last time and anything else. Just think about how you're going to get that ballot in to be counted. There were a couple questions I think we got ahead of time that I think I can maybe address right away to go forward with this before we have any additional questions. And one was, I need assistance placing my ballot in the mailbox. Do I need an accommodation from my clerk? No, you need the accommodation if you need to deliver it in person to the clerk. You don't need to request an accommodation to put it in the US mail, okay? Next one, I heard my clerk say that it's illegal for any voter, including disabled voters, to have assistance to place their ballot in the mailbox or have someone else deliver their ballot to the clerk or polling place. What should I do as a voter with a disability if I need that accommodation? Well, that's two parts. One, is it illegal for a voter, including a disabled voter, to have assistance putting their ballot in the mailbox? No, that is fine. Remember, the mailbox is different than taking it in person. So the second part where you do want to ask for that modification is if you're going to need assistance taking it in person to the clerk. And that's the process we just talked about. Call them up, tell them you need a disability related modification, fill out the little sample form that we have on our website, give it to the person who's delivering it for you along with your ballot, and take a picture of everything before you send it off so you have a copy. If I have, okay, and this, we already talked about this too. If I have someone else deliver my absentee ballot and send an accommodation request with it, how will I know if my ballot is accepted? You can check on My Vote Wisconsin, which is an online place to check and see through the election commission to see if your vote is where it is in the process. And there's a link to that on our website. If my ballot is not accepted by the clerk, where do I make a complaint? Number one, call a voter hotline. I think we might be able to help you that day and talk to the clerk and explain the law. But also the Department of Justice and the state Wisconsin Election Commission both have places to complain, and there's links to on our website. And I think Barbara just put the number for our voter hotline in the chat. So those are the questions I had already. I'm willing to take any others that people may have if I can answer them if I'm able.
Kit, there was another question in the chat. Do you need to show your voter ID when you deliver your ballot to the polling location? And I can take that one if you don't want to.
Sure.
Okay, so I think this is a really important question because there's been a lot of discussion about this, including at a recent meeting of the Wisconsin Election Commission. And my understanding is that there is no requirement in current law that voters need to show their ID when they deliver their ballot to the polling location. So that is not a question or a requirement that should be imposed on voters by the clerk. If you do have that concern, we'd be interested in hearing about it if you have that problem, and perhaps we can help to resolve it. Clerks, I will say that clerks have a lot of autonomy. We have 1,852 municipal clerks, and they do a great job, but they do have some independence in how they conduct elections. So we'll do our best to help you and to get that issue resolved. But our understanding is there's no requirement in current law, so the clerk should not be asking you to show your voter ID when you deliver your ballot. Only if you are voting in person is that a requirement, or requesting an absentee ballot.
And the voter ID requirement was handled further upstream when you got your absentee ballot. So they should have assurance that only people who are registered and legitimate voters will get that ballot in the first place. So now you're just filling it out and putting it in the envelope. So it doesn't have to be a double thing. They took care of that earlier on in the process.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm not sure if I see any additional questions in the chat right now, and that probably is pretty good in terms of our timing, but just want to make sure.
There is a comment from
I saw.
election. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jenny. So we do have a comment in the chat from one of the Wisconsin Election Commission staff, and thank you so much, Regina. She commented that clerks can ask for an ID, but voters are not required to provide it. So, so that's very helpful. Thank you, Regina. All right. I don't think we see any other questions. So at this point, I want to thank you, Kit, for sharing some really good information, and again, reinforce all of that information is on the Disability Vote Coalition website and the Disability Rights Wisconsin website. We know a lot of people are confused right now. We are hearing from them and getting calls on our voter hotline. So please help us get the word out. We will send a follow-up email to everyone who is registered with the links to this information. And thank you in advance for helping to get the word out to people whose right to vote is impacted by this. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Jenny to introduce the next portion of our program.
Oh, sorry, is that me or Brian?
Jenny, you were going to introduce Denise now, or I can do so.
Sorry about that. I missed my cue.
No
All
worries.
right. I'm very happy to introduce one of our strongest coalition members, Denise Jess, is the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. And she is going to moderate our next panel with self-advocates.
Jenny, thank you so much. I was like, I can do it myself, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Charlotte and Kit, thank you for really informative presentations. I'm Denise Jess, as Jenny noted, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and very honored today to introduce you to three Wisconsin voters with disabilities from around the state who are going to share their perspective and experience on the ADA and voting rights. So let me introduce Stacy Ellingen from Oshkosh, Trudy LeBeau from Sheboygan, and Felicia Claiborne from Milwaukee. And I'll be asking each panelist a series of questions. I know that we can get to 2 and hopefully we can get to 3. Each panelist will have an opportunity to speak on the question so that you can hear multiple perspectives. Stacy will do the first question, and let me go ahead and share that question with all of you. The ADA was signed into law 32 years ago in 1990. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act required state and local governments to ensure that people with disabilities have a full and equal opportunity to vote. Since the signing of the ADA, what progress do you think has been made with providing full and equal access to voting for people with disabilities? What are the continuing challenges? So again, we'll hear from all 3 panelists. And Stacy, I'd love it if you want to kick us off.
I'm Stacy Ellingen. I live in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I'm a self-advocate. I'm one of the hosts on the Self-Determination YouTube channel, and I run the Self-Determination Network, which is an online community for people who support self-determination and self-directed supports for people with disabilities. I also serve on various disability advocacy boards. I have a unique perspective because I was 5 years old when the ADA was signed. I obviously wasn't aware of voting rights back then, but from what I gather, a lot of progress has been made. Things such as requiring polling places to be accessible and having accessible voting machines where people can vote independently are major steps in the right direction. Wisconsin also has a program where polling places are reviewed for accessibility. This is great progress. However, we still have a long way to go. In the past year or so, legislators have introduced new bills that would make it harder for people with disabilities to vote. Recently, in Wisconsin, we've been dealing with the Teagle ruling, which was about mailing and delivering absentee ballots. It has caused a lot of confusion for voters like myself because it seems to conflict with our rights under the ADA. For example, the Wisconsin Election Commission director said the voter is the one required to mail their ballot. Wisconsin needs to stop going after voter rights and enforce the ADA and other laws that protect the right of people with disabilities. It absolutely infuriates me that we still have to fight for basic rights like these.
See, thank you so much for kicking this off. Felicia, are you feeling ready to go next to address the progress of the ADA and also the challenges when it comes to voting rights?
Yes, I do. I believe that we have came a long way and that a lot has really, really changed from 1990 up to now. It's just in the last year, it's just made it difficult for us to be able to express our rights into coming into a place or to mail our ballot. And that it needs to be changed in a way that we can express ourselves freely, to drop it in a mailbox or either go to a municipal building and put it in. That's what the changes need to be made. But just to walk into a polling place and to vote is a wonderful, wonderful feeling to do.
Yes. Felicia, thank you. I would agree with you 150%. Thank you so much. And Trudy, what's your perspective on this question?
Hi, I'm Trudy LeBeau. I'm in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I've had secondary progressive MS for almost 30 years, and I'm now a quadriplegic. And I appreciate the ADA. It's made a lot of strides for making public buildings, public sidewalks, public bathrooms more accessible. And the voting has improved, but not as much as I'd like to see. My polling place in particular, they do have one lowered table for voting. And they do help me fill out a ballot. But I feel like the officials and the poll workers are not adequately educated as far as their obligations for ADA. I have gotten questioned and not treated as independently as I'd like to have been.
Thank you, Trudy. I'm going to have you kick off the next question too. So let me share it with everyone. This year, Wisconsin has seen new restrictions impacting the voting rights of many people with disabilities. And each of you so far have addressed that in your opening remarks. Many voters have been concerned and confused about the restrictions regarding assistance with mailing or delivering of an absentee ballot, as well as the elimination of drop boxes. The ADA should protect the rights of voters with disabilities to have assistance, but some voters have been denied accommodations. What is your opinion of how these changes may impact voters with disabilities, and how might some changes impact your voting rights? And Trudy, will you kick it off, and then we'll go to Stacy and Felicia.
As a wheelchair-bound quadriplegic, I consider myself to be indefinitely combined because many, many variables factor into whether or not I can be at the polls on voting day. My health varies from day to day, sometimes from hour to hour. And if I'm not feeling well, I'm not going to go and vote in person. Sometimes transportation is not available. Sometimes weather conditions are not good for me to go outside. And sometimes my caregiver schedules does not allow for assistance. Absentee ballots really guarantee my ability to vote at any election. And because my hands are not functional any longer, I require another person to put my ballot into my mailbox. Recent rulings now claim that that is considered to be voter fraud. Not in Wisconsin, but a lot of states are making noise about not allowing disabled people to have other people put their ballots in the box. In 2017, it was found that 11.8%, or 676,100 Wisconsinites, are disabled. And that is many voters that can be discouraged by the difficulty and obstacles that current legislators are threatening to make. And then they can prevent it from voting. I fear that for some reason, perhaps disabled people have been identified as a block of voters that tend to vote one way or the other. And that's why we're being targeted. And I'm not sure. But there should be no reason why a disabled person like myself can't vote in an election.
Judy, thank you so much for your candor in your story. Stacy, let's hear from you.
Due to transportation and care issues, I always vote absentee. I need physical assistance filling out the ballot and putting it in a mailbox. When this Teagan case came about, I worried about my ability to vote. Just because I can't physically put the ballot in a box myself shouldn't mean I can't vote. It was mind-blowing to me that this was even a thing. Especially with the caregiver shortage, I can't risk asking my caregivers to supposedly commit a crime by placing my ballot in the mailbox for me. Granted, the sly side of me knows the rule would be impossible to ever enforce, but it's the point that it would be a crime if it ever came into question. People were suggesting going to the clerk's office and filling out a voter assistance form. The problem with that is getting to the office and physically filling out the form would be really hard to do. It's almost impossible to get reliable transportation in my city. For the April and August elections, I had a close family member help me fill out the ballot and put it in the mailbox. This person was willing to supposedly commit a crime so I could vote. From what I'm understanding, the ADA should protect this if questioning should arise. It makes me wonder what I'll do in the future when this person may not be around to help me. I'll cross that bridge when it comes, I guess, but I think it's absolutely ridiculous that this is even something we have to worry about.
Stacy, thank you so much for the honesty of your story. And Felicia, I would love to hear from you as well.
In my answer to that question, I have difficulty with transportation and also finding a mailbox to put it in, because it's hard. It's very hard, especially when you're on paratransit and then you turn around and you pay $4 to go down there, and then you have to wait another hour in order to get picked up again. That's why I suggested to the governor's staff to give us a voter stimulus if that's the case. I believe that the ADA should protect us on this because it needs to be to a point where we can still vote freely. It's just to a point. Why does it have to be to a point when we have to sit here and have visit the municipal building or mailbox? I'm willing to put it in my mailbox at my residence. But when it comes to basically put it in a mailbox, what if the sun is too bright, or it's raining, or it's snowing, or something like that, I won't be able to put it in. So yeah, if I have to break the law, so let it be, but I don't want to do it constantly, and I don't want nobody looking at me like, oh, she got somebody put it in the mailbox and then call the police. So yeah, I'm just wishing that it will change sooner or later.
Felicia, thank you. I want to thank all three of you, Stacy, Felicia, and Trudy, for the integrity and the honesty and the power of your stories. And I want to emphasize to all of us in attendance today that Trudy's and Stacy's and Felicia's stories are also not unique. Many of us with disabilities in this room and across the state can resonate strongly with the perspective that each of you brought. We have one more question, and I know we are out of time for this, but so I want to still speak the question because I think it's a powerful one for us to all hold in mind as we continue to work for equity in voting rights for all people with disabilities. So we'll celebrate the 40th anniversary of the ADA in 2020. 8 years from now, what do you hope the world will look like for people with disabilities? And so I want to leave the panel there with that question of creating a strong vision together as we move forward towards the 40th anniversary. And now it's my my honor to introduce Brian Peters with Independence First, and also a member of the Disability Vote Coalition, to close out our session together. It's all yours, Brian.
Thank you for that nice introduction. I've heard all different stories, and I wanted you to know that the first time that I voted was probably around the year 1988 or 1989, somewhere in there. To be honest, it was easy for me. You know, the polling place was right across the street, so it was really nothing for me to go over there and vote. It took me like a minute, including going to the bathroom even. But here's the thing. It was easy for me, but I understand it wasn't easy for everybody to access fully for registering and voting. Not everyone has the same access to registration or filling out their ballot as they need in an easy approach. So for many people, they don't understand that. They don't understand that people don't have the luxury of having easy access to filling out their ballot. And to be honest, many people do think that if you can't register or go to the polling place the quote unquote normal way, you shouldn't be allowed to vote at all. And that's what we're fighting for, our right to vote. When we get that movement, what you do affects me, what I do affects you. We're all in this together. I want to make sure that voting and everything is accessible for everyone. And that's what we're fighting for. That's why we fought for the ADA to be passed. Everyone who is part of the Disability Vote Coalition, make sure that voting is accessible for all. And will you join in that fight with us? Will you help us protect our right to vote and increase that? Increase the rights.
Brian, thank you so much for that powerful closing message. And thank you for everyone who joined us today, and special thanks to all of our presenters, especially our panel members who shared such impactful information about how equitable access to voting for people with disabilities continues to be a challenge in Wisconsin, even as we celebrate the 32nd anniversary of the Americans Disabilities Act, which protects that equitable access. So as Brian said, we ask all of you to make a commitment. Let's work together to ensure that our elections in Wisconsin are more accessible and inclusive, and that everyone can have the right to cast a ballot and participate in our democracy. We'll be sending out a follow-up email to you with the resources we shared today, and we welcome any feedback and questions you have. We will stick around for a little bit on the Zoom in case anyone has additional questions, but that's the end of our program today. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you to everyone that shared today. I appreciate all of you sharing your stories and the impacts you have experienced.
I do have one question, if I may.
Sure, Trudy, go ahead.
My question is, what does a disabled voter do when they get pushback from either official, city village official on voting day or a poll worker, when they argue that you don't have that right, when in fact you do?
Well, that's a great question, Trudy. And at DRW and the Disability Vote Coalition, we would suggest a few things to people. First, if it's a poll worker, talk to the chief election inspector at your polling place to share the concern. If they aren't helpful, the next step could be to talk to your municipal clerk, because that is their responsibility and they should be informed of your concerns. You can definitely contact us at the Disability Rights Wisconsin Voter Hotline. And if you want assistance in making some kind of a complaint, the Wisconsin Elections Commission does have a process for making a complaint. And as we heard today, so does the U.S. Department of Justice, if that would be appropriate and something the voter wanted to do. And we're ready and willing to help people to understand their rights. And if they need assistance with making a complaint, we can do that. Is that helpful in answering your question?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
It's important for people to make complaints.
Yeah, I would also ask the clerk if they'll allow you to cast a provisional ballot so you get more time to straighten it out. If you think you're right and that they're wrong, that means they hold it aside and then you can fight about it a little later. And then if you're right, then they'll count it. And if they don't want to, they won't.
Barbara, this is Kathy Bernier.
Oh, thank you, Senator Bernier.
Well, I got to chime in on this one. I drafted part of the county clerk's constitutional or statutory authorities to be the chief election official in the county. And so if you have, the first thing you do is go to the chief inspector to share your concern. The second is to call your municipal clerk. And they generally will be right there at the polling place to straighten out people with misunderstanding. And then finally, you do have a county clerk you can call. And so I've had problems at the municipal level where, actually it was poll watchers a couple of different times called me because the town chair involved himself in running elections. So you're right, the autonomy of municipal clerks and municipal poll workers is a challenge for sure, but there's generally always a remedy, and your county clerk is kind of where the buck stops usually. From there, you can always call the Wisconsin Election Commission if none of the above worked for you.
Well, thank you very much, as always, Senator Bernier. We actually hadn't, suggested to people that they reach out to their county clerk. So that's helpful to know that you'd recommend that as a resource and see that as part of their role. So thanks for being here today and for that input, which we really appreciate.
You're very welcome.
Any other comments, questions? I know we've been getting some additional comments in the chat. Martha Chambers shared the comment, nothing about us without us. And, I think that's really true. And that's why we think it was so important today to have Trudy Stacy and Felicia here to talk directly about their experience as voters with disabilities.
Edwards has left the meeting. 1608698676 has left the meeting.
Yep.
Kathleen Callan has left the meeting. From Jamie Crofts to everyone forward, thank you. Daniel Evans has left the meeting. Michael Sperling has left the meeting. J11141.2. Jean Falcher has left the meeting. Kathy Bernier has Neil Diverger has left the meeting. Reese has left the meeting.
Well, thanks again to all of our speakers, to our interpreters, and to all of you for being here. I see Senator Chris Larson is here. Thanks so much for being here, Senator Larson. We really appreciate it. And if I missed any of our other electeds, I know some staff were here. Thanks for being here and for being part of the dialogue. If there aren't any other comments or questions, maybe the speakers can just stick around for another few minutes and we can just debrief for a minute and get your thoughts on any next steps.
Thank you all again and have a wonderful weekend.